Hello, and today I'm going to show you around the IBM Cloud console that we use for provisioning some of the machines at Adoptium. This is going to be slightly different from some of the other tutorials we have in this set because I'm going to show how to create some of the extra objects that you need within the user interface before we get started. I will create a section on this video once it's published to show the bits that is only related to the provisioning of the machines. When you first log in, you get this dashboard view here. Now you can always get back to the dashboard by clicking this button up in the corner. As you hover over it, it tells you what it is. Similar to that one, there's projects that we don't need too much. Resource list, which we will use quite a bit. If you click the burger icon on the top, you get the names associated with them, with each of the icons as well, if you can't remember what they are. So I'm going to go to infrastructure to begin with, because I'm going to show you a couple of things that we need to create before we get started as a one-off. Under networking, there is VPCs, which is your virtual private cloud. In here, I will click create. Now you'll notice that in a lot of cases in the IBM Cloud user interface, there is a blue button that's highlighted, like this big create one. It's also used. You also find there's big blue buttons for acknowledging the final create the item thing. So often, if you're not sure what to click, you're looking for a big blue button somewhere. So I will click this. All of the names of the things we create are going to be prefixed with Adoptium. You'll also notice that in terms of the naming, you're only allowed to use lowercase characters or numbers and hyphens, and it can't end in a hyphen. So if I try and end this with a hyphen, it will show up that error message there saying the name can't end with a hyphen. So I'm going to start with Adoptium. I'll call it VPC, and because these are associated with a region, I will put the region name on the end of it as well. In case we want to have machines in multiple regions, we'll need a separate VPC for each of them. The resource group, I'm going to use this one called Adoptium resource group that I created previously. I was initially using separate ones for build and test, but now there's no real need for that as it happens. So I'm going to stick with just a top level Adoptium resource group. If we scroll down, there's a default security group that it will create. Now I'm going to create a custom one anyway, but for now I will just allow it to have one that will allow SSH and ping connections through. So that's all we need to do to create the virtual private cloud. As you can see over on the right hand side here, there is a big blue button again. So I'm just going to click that, and that's the one that we use to complete the operation. And there we see it, and it's created me a default security group with just 4 random words with dashes in between them. Now I don't think it's very easy to change the default security group, so we're probably going to have to specify the security groups when we create each machine. For now, I'm going to create my own security group using this link on the left. You can see that that's the default one that it created for our new VPC. So I'm going to create another one here. So as always, I will start with Adoptium and the name of the thing that I'm creating. Now we're going to have separate ones for Windows and Linux here. So I'm going to start with Windows, and again, because this is associated with a region, I'll add EUGB onto it. Again, select the Adoptium resource group. The virtual private cloud VPC that it's associated with will be the one that we've created. So that's the one it's showing me by default here. Now in terms of inbound rules, because we're setting one up for Windows machines, we want to allow remote desktop connections in. So I will put in the remote desktop port, and we'll allow it from anywhere for now. The other one we need to add is the one for the WinRM management stuff, because that's used by our AWX server to provision the machines. So again, I'm going to create another one which is on port 5986, and the same again, just allow connections from anywhere. In terms of outbound rules, we don't want to restrict that, so we're just going to allow everything for this security group. You can also add one for ping if you want, but I'm going to leave that for now. Again, now that we've defined those things we want to let in, I'll click Create Security Group. Later on, not in this demo, I will create another one which is Adoptium Security Group Linux EUGB, and rather than these 2 ports, I will only allow port 22, which is the SSH port that we use for Linux machines. There we go. So now we have that security group. So now that's done, and I'll create a section in this video once it's published so that we can show just the bit that we're interested in terms of provisioning machines. We come out of the infrastructure section here. We go to resource list, and we want to create a new compute resource, so click the big create resource button over on the right. We're going to select compute here, and then the first option is the one we want, virtual server for VPC. So now we've got a virtual private cloud, we're going to create a server within that. Once again, you select which location it's in. That's in common with all the other providers, fairly standard. And we want to make sure we are creating them in an area that already has a VPC defined in it, which we have because we just created that one with EUGB. So name of the machine, again, same restrictions, everything else can't end in a hyphen, but that's fine. So give it a name like that. We're going to create a Windows Server 2022 system. Resource group, again, Adoptium resource group. The default image it's offering me is CentOS Stream 9. In this particular case, we want a Windows machine, so we can go in, select Windows based. Select from various Windows versions. We want 2022, the latest one. Again, big blue button. So now it's selection Windows Server 2022 Standard Edition. You get the choice of what size of machine to have. I'm going to stick with the defaults here, which is 2 CPU, 4 GB of RAM. You can click the change profile button and get lots of other options if you need different ones. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to stick with that. Now there's this SSH keys option here. You can select multiple ones. We're going to stick with the Adoptium SSH key that we have configured here. Even though we're creating a Windows machine that will not have SSH access, you still need to have an SSH key associated with it, because the way that IBM Cloud has of retrieving the password to log into the system is by using your SSH key to authenticate to be able to retrieve that. And I'll come back to that a little later. In this case, you can also add additional data volumes. I am going to create one extra one here because quite often on Windows the default size isn't enough. Various options, various performance options and so on. I will give it a name that is equivalent to the name of the machine. And suffix it with data. Data 1, apparently I already have one called that, which I'll have to get rid of later. Storage size, again, 100 GB is a reasonable amount for most of the things we need to do at Adoptium. And then I'll press the green button to create that. So that's now got the extra machine associated with it, the extra disk associated with it. Should be, there it goes, data 1. If we now go down to the virtual network interfaces, you see it's got one security group associated with it at the moment. That will be the one that is the default for the Adoptium VPC. I'm going to edit that. Can leave the first page as it is. If we go onto the network page now, we've got the security groups. Now that's showing me the VPC default one. I want to change that to my new one, which will allow the RDP and WinRM connections through. If I had a way of setting the default to this one, I wouldn't need to go through this section. But until I find the way to do that, we just select it manually at this point when you're creating the machine. So now that's done, we've got all the parameters we want for this machine. We can now again press the blue button, which is the one that actually goes away and creates the server. Just give it a second, and you'll see there it's starting up now. Now, as I said, in order to access this machine, because it's a Windows one, it's not done directly with your SSH key, but you do need to retrieve the credentials using your SSH key, the one that is associated with the machine. If I go to the top right and click my profile avatar here, there's a link here which is login to CLI and API. Now I'm not going to click that just now because it does give some secret credentials, but those are the ones that you will use when you download the IBM Cloud command line interface, and that will let you log into it and be able to run the commands to retrieve it. I will put those commands in the description of this video once it's published. As you can see now, this machine is up and running, and so It doesn't currently have a floating IP address associated with it. Now this drop down lets you see the different operations you can perform, so you can stop it, rename it, and so on. If I go into the machine now, the networking section, now because it doesn't have a floating IP address, from this page I can click Actions, Edit Floating IPs. I can also change the security groups and things on there. No floating IP at the moment, as we saw. So attach a new floating IP. And again, I'm just mostly clicking on whatever the blue button is that I'm looking for. I'm happy to leave it with the default, so we'll attach that onto the machine. And there it goes. That machine now has a floating IP address associated with it. And if I go back to my virtual server instances, it should show up there. I'm just going to refresh that screen. Give it a sec. And the floating IP address for my new machine is there. So that's what I'll use to connect to it once I've got the password out of the command line. Okay, that's about it for now. Thank you.